I want to thank the sponsor for today's shir. This shir is being sponsored the Refuat Chaim Gabriel Greenberg ben Rivka. We wish that he should have please God, a quick and speedy recovery. I want to just premise today's shir by saying the following. Yesterday, Rabbi Yossi Golden, who usually speaks on our Tuesday morning program, wasn't feeling well. So unfortunately, he wasn't able to come and give the shir yesterday. So what ended up happening was I jumped in, I gave my shir. The intention was that this should be a two-part shir. One was going to be given today, part one, and part two is going to be given next week. But what ends up happening is I gave part one yesterday, and we're going to do part two today. If you're nervous, don't be. I'll fill you in. You'll be just fine. You don't need part one to understand part two. They're separate. But I think it's important that everyone should know why it is that you have an 8-page packet, and we're not going to go through all 8 pages. So you shouldn't be confused, okay? We're going to start the learning today. We're on the bottom of page 4. This is where part 2 begins. Okay, the bottom of page 4. Okay, but just to give a quick recap, I think it's important, so everyone understands a little bit of context. We're going to be talking today about the man. The man, as we know, was a very important mitzvah we had in this past week's Parsha B'Shalach. Very often we don't get to focus on the man. We're very focused on the splitting of the sea, this major event. And the man sort of takes a back seat. So I think it's important, though, that we delve into this mitzvah. You'll see there's many, many connections to what we do throughout the week, especially on Shabbos, in connection with the man. And it's important that we have this important takeaway that we can walk away and we can understand practical ramifications for our own lives that we learn from the man. So quick recap. Yesterday we mentioned that many poskim hold that there is a mitzvah d'oraita, a biblical mitzvah to prepare on Friday for Shabbos, which is very interesting in light of the fact that we know there's 4 mitzvahs we have every single Shabbos. We have Zachor, the mitzvah to remember Shabbos, which we do by marking the bookends of Shabbos. Right, we do Kiddush at the beginning, and we do Havdalah at the end. We have Shamor, which means we're not supposed to do Malacha. Right? Those are the 2 in the Torah. Everyone knows those, hopefully, right? We're not supposed to do Malacha on Shabbos, Zachor and Shamor. And then we also have the 2 rabbinic mitzvot. The Rambam tells us, the very beginning of Hilchot Shabbos, the Rambam writes, we have kavod. What's kavod? Okay, very good. To honor Shabbat, to respect Shabbat. We do that by preparing for Shabbat, before Shabbat. And then we have the last one is oneg. Oneg means to delight in Shabbat. To enjoy Shabbos. Shabbos should be enjoyable. You should enjoy yummy foods. If you enjoy taking a nap, you should take a nap. If you enjoy talking with your family, you should talk with your family. That's oneg Shabbat. So those are the rabbinic mitzvot, kavod and oneg. So it's interesting that the mitzvah of oneg is only mitzvah d'Rabbanan, to enjoy Shabbos. And yet, we pointed out, it's very odd, that the mitzvah that we have to prepare for Shabbos would actually be d'oraita. It's an interesting dichotomy. But nonetheless, the many poskim hold this way. And we pointed out that we asked the question yesterday, can you have a late shacharit minyan? Is that appropriate? Is that inappropriate? You want to have a Friday morning if people often want to catch up on sleep. So is that appropriate or not? So we pointed out, it's very interesting that it's really not recommended. It's not the appropriate practice. We're supposed to prepare early in the morning, Friday morning. We're supposed to actually get up earlier. But I think people want to do the inverse. Right? We're supposed to get up earlier to prepare for Shabbos. And so we go right after davening. And we mentioned that unless the person has a kavua seder or a person's learning regularly, really what you're supposed to do is you should... Wait.
Something's on the phone here.
If I could just ask everyone to silence their phones, that'd be helpful. Thank you. Okay. So we're supposed to start our Shabbos preparations right before Shabbos. Right after Shacharit. And unless the person has a kavua seder, if they're usually learning at that time, then we said that's an exception. They can learn first, and they can go and be engaged in their Shabbos preparations a little bit later. And finally, we mentioned something very interesting, which is that even if, let's say, a person, right, you know you're going to go to the store, you're going to go to the store later, and they're going to run out of whatever it is that you need for Shabbos, right? Nonetheless, you're allowed to go early in the morning, even before davening, if you need to go and purchase whatever you need from the store. Even though in the Shulchan Aruch we know that we're forbidden to do our own personal needs before davening, this is not considered a personal need. To shop and prepare for Shabbos is considered Cheftzei Shamayim. That's what Hashem wants us to be doing. And therefore, you're allowed to even do something like that. Even if it takes an hour or 2 hours, you're allowed to do even that before Shachrit, with the understanding that, of course, you'll make sure to say the Shema at the right time and you won't miss Zman Tefillah. Okay, so that was from yesterday. Let's zoom over to today. Okay, again, we're on the bottom of page 4. Okay, we have here 2 interesting questions. And the truth is, these questions I put on the source sheet even before yesterday. At the end of yesterday's year, I can't tell you how many people raised their hand or came up to me afterwards and they asked these exact questions. So I said you have to come for today. So thank you to those who came. Okay, question number 2. Rabbi, Fridays are pretty crazy for us. And we've been thinking about doing some of our preparations earlier in the week. A friend of ours told us we're not supposed to prepare before Friday. Is he correct? Not correct. Everyone wants to say not correct. Forget him. Maybe that friend came to yesterday's year, got confused. Okay. Question number 3. One more question. The grocery stores around here are packed on Thursday nights. Bottom of page 4, yeah. The grocery stores around here are packed on Thursday nights and Fridays with some pretty religious looking people. Aside from procrastination, is there anything special about shopping for Shabbos on Erev Shabbos? So a similar question, is there something unique to shopping specifically on Friday? And are we allowed, or perhaps even recommended, perhaps forbidden, we have to discuss, to do our preparations early in the week? I'll tell you for myself, as much as I try to do my preparations early in the week, I'm not so great. It's hard to do it earlier in the week. Friday's our day off, Friday's a little easier. But for a lot of people who want to be prepared on Friday, it is a benefit to be prepared earlier in the week. I had someone come over to me yesterday and they said, Friday, when they made Aliyah here, they said it was so important to them, they have a Sunday. And we don't have a Sunday in Israel. What's our Sunday? Our Sunday is Friday. So they said what they started to do in their house is they do all the preparations before Friday. So this way they can have a Sunday. So is that appropriate? Are we allowed to do that? So we'll see. What? Oh, so I'm getting a lot of nods. Okay, of course, it's good. You should do it. Yeah. So we'll see as we go. We'll see what the poskim say about this. I think it's an important question. And I think it's also important to think about on a practical level. You can talk about from Mocha till today until tomorrow, but practically, when it comes down to it, what's going to be the situation in my house if I'm preparing on Friday? But these are things we have to think about. What is my house going to look like? What's going to happen to my shalom bayis? I'll tell you, that people very often on Fridays are extremely stressed. Yeah? Okay. So whatever we can do before, if the halacha permits us to do it before, I think we should try and understand. Maybe it's appropriate. And I'll add, we know the end of we say, many of us Ashkenazi Jews, we know Friday night what we do. We say Bamei Madlikin. We're sitting in Shul, right? But after Kabbalat Shabbat, before we start Marv, some Nusach Sfar, they do it after Marv. Okay. So different practices. Some don't say it at all. But if you read the last Mishnah in the second parak, in Bamei Madlikin, it says that Shloshah Dvarim Tzarich Adam Lamar B'toch Beito Erev Shabbat. That there are 3 things a person needs to say in their home, right in their home, right before Shabbat. And it tells us what they are, right? Did you take off Maser, right? Did you set up an Eruv? And then once you made sure about those 2 things, the last one is a tzivui, it's a command. Go ahead, light the candles. So once you made sure that you took off Maser, so you can eat the fruit on Shabbos, which is important. Not being able to eat the fruit on Shabbos would be bad. It's also important because we're not allowed to have even achivat zarai. During the week, right, we can't eat untithed produce even during the week. But certainly on Shabbat, we're not even allowed to eat achivat arai. All of the eating that we do on Shabbat is considered like kavur. It's considered set. It's considered something that is like a set meal, even if you're just having a snack on Shabbat. Because Shabbat is more mufubad, we sit down, we're like kings, we're like princes, queens, princesses, okay? And so what we do, the eating we do on Shabbos, even though a small snack, you have to take off maser from. We don't have the heter of achilah, right? So one of the questions you have to ask is, do you take off maser? Eruv, did you set up an Eruv, right? We have 2 types of Eruv, Eruvei chatzirot, right? And Eruvei tchumin. So you have to make sure, are we going to be allowed to carry? Can you carry from the houses to the chatzir? Right? You have to set up a system you'll be able to carry on Shabbat, very important, for yourself as an individual, and also as a community, that we have such an institution as an Eruv. And then finally, once you did that, you have to make sure, go ahead, light the candles. Then you can go ahead and light. So, there's one thing that no one pays any attention to, though. The first words that we started with. Where do you have to say these? Where do you have to ask these questions and say these words? What does it say? There are three things a person needs to say. Betoch beito. Inside his home. So many of them Farshim were left scratching their heads. Why do we have to say these words in my house? What, I'm going to go out on the street and say them? I'm going to go on the, I live in Har Nof. In Har Nof they have like an overhead, whatever you call it. They make announcements of this like overhead system. And then there's Shabbos music that plays. That's where you have to ask the questions? No, of course not. You ask the questions in your home. Why does the Mishnah have to emphasize to us that you have to ask these questions and say these statements in your home? So one of the classic answers, one of my favorite answers, is that because what happens on Erev Shabbos, the Satan is working extra hard to ruin our Shalom Bayit. He's bending over backwards. He wants us to not have Shalom Bayit. And therefore he does everything within his power to cause us to yell and to scream to the extent that even the neighbors will hear us. So that's what the mission tells us. No, say it gently. Ask nicely. Did we take off Master yet? The neighbors don't need to hear that. In your own home. Keep it in your home. Keep the Shalom. Speak quietly, speak softly. Sometimes we're in a rush. So in some people's homes, sometimes that happens. We're in a rush right before Shabbos. So we start shouting, did anyone? Right? That's not how we talk. We talk benachat. We're Jews. We go over, to say something to someone, go over, talk quietly, b'tzina, b'lachash. Keep the Shalom Bayit, keep the peace in the home. It's very important. And I think that's what the mission is teaching us. Yeah.
I think there's an error to do this, and you bring in before Shabbos, even on Friday, and that's why when you're doing last minute things, and there's this, and there's yelling, and the house is a mess. Quick! What are you teaching your children? B, where is the air of Menucha and Kedusha that should transcend your home already on Friday?
Correct.
And 3, what's the Yerusha for your children when this is what they experience on Friday?
Correct. I agree 100%. I would just add, we try so much, we're trying to create an atmosphere in Avirah for our homes. So it's important not only on a pragmatic level that we want our children to model what we do and to experience what it means to have a Shalom Bayit, but also for ourselves. How do we feel when we enter Shabbos? We don't always ask that question, but it's a very important question. How do I feel when I start my Shabbos? So, okay. I'm happy you said that. We're going to come back. Who said that? Raise your hand.
Exhausted.
Perfect. Okay. So we're going to come back to that. I think we all feel exhausted. We're going to see at the end of today's class how we can perhaps alleviate that concern. Okay? So let's start. We're on the top of page 5. I'll give you one quick story here. Before we start the sources, we have here a young, newly married man complained to Rabbi Yechezkel Levenstein that as much as he reminded his wife, she was never ready on time to light the Shabbos candles. He asked for advice on how to remedy the problem, and Rabbi Yechezkel responded, you pick up a broom. So, very often the answer is to take action. We can't sit back. We can't just relax. We have to all be involved. It has to be personal involvement when it comes to Shabbos preparations. We saw yesterday, it's quoted in the Shulchan Aruch even. He goes through many of the Tanaim and the Amoraim who were personally involved in all of the nitty-gritty preparations for Shabbos, even things that you might have thought are below them, they're never below us. And we saw that Ramah said in an unbelievable comment that the way we receive our honor, we shouldn't say it's below me, it's below my dignity, it's below my honor. The way our honor is dependent on what we put in for our preparations for Shabbos. That's what Ramah writes. What we put in, even if it's a lowly task, you're sweeping the floor, you're doing the laundry, whatever it is, something very lowly. No, that's my kavod. That's my kavod. My kavod is directly dependent on what I put in for Shabbos. So that being said, let's go back to our question. Let's dive into the sources. Source number 14, page 5. Okay, this is believe it or not, we're starting from a piece of Masechet Tanit, which is very interesting. It's not the first place I would have looked for the answer, but it tells us about the interconnectedness of the Torah. It's unbelievable. When you want to study a certain section of Halacha, everything is connected. People think you could just learn Hilchot Shabbos to get away and know all the laws of Shabbos. It's not true. The Torah is interconnected. So we start here with the Mishnah we have in Tanit. It tells us we're not allowed to declare a public fast day, but Tchiwa b'chamishi, on a Thursday. So why not? What's the problem? Make a public fast day. When do we normally have public fast days? What days on the calendar? Good. So normally it's Monday, Thursday, Monday. Anyone here has heard of the fast of Behab? Fast of Behab, okay? Fast of Behab is Monday, Thursday, Monday, right? Bet is Monday, Yom Sheni. Hey, Chamishi, and then another bet, Yom Sheni. So whenever there used to be, there wasn't rain or there's a public tragedy, they would declare a public fast day. It wasn't just the 6 fast days we already have set on the calendar, Yom Kippur, Tisha B'Av, etc. They would declare an additional fast day in order to get rain or whatever the community needed if there was a tragedy. There's a common occurrence, unfortunately. So today we don't do it so much. I think we're already very weak from fasting the poskim, right? Many of us are already very weak, so we try not to declare extra fast days. We bend over backwards to try not to do it. But if you do have to declare a fast day, the first time you're supposed to do it is on a Monday, not on a Thursday. So you might say, what's the difference? Monday and Thursday are marketplace days, the days of judgment, which is why we go ahead and declare specifically those days. But what does it matter whether it's Monday, Thursday, Monday, or if it's Thursday, Monday, Thursday? To me, they sound the same. So the Mishnah says, no, you're not supposed to declare a fast day for the first time, on a Thursday. Why not? Shelo ha'afkia sharim. Because we do not want that the gates, what gates are we talking about?
Prices.
Very good. Should be affected by the declaration of the public fast day. Ela shalosh taniyot rishonot, sheni v'chamishi v'sheni. Rather, you have to keep the normal system: Monday, Thursday, Monday, v'shalosh shniyot, chamishi, sheni v'chamishi. And then we know we then have multiple sets of fast days. So then the next time it comes around, then it's already considered on the heels of the first day, and that's a little different. But again, for the first time you declare fast day, it cannot be on a Thursday. So look at Rashi. Why not? What's the big deal? What's the problem? Rashi in the next source explains, as he often does in the Gemara, Shelo lafki et hasharim. Why would that affect the market price? Because kishuruim ba'alei chanuyot, when the store owners see shekonin l'motzei yom chamishi, everyone's going out to buy. Thursday is coming to an end, and now everyone's going out to the store, and what are they going to buy? Not one, but shtei su'udot gedolot. So they're buying 2 giant meals. Achat le'leil chamishi, one for Thursday night when they break their fast, ve'achat le'Shabbat, and one for Shabbos. So sfurim sheba ra'av la'olam. And now they think, why is the store owners are thinking to themselves, why is everyone coming in, they're buying so much food, all of a sudden these giant meals, why is everyone buying so much? It must be, there's a famine coming. Umiyakrim umafkim ashar. And now they're going to raise the prices. They're going to make it very difficult for people because they think the produce they have must be very valuable, must be very important. And they're going to raise the prices, it can affect the whole market. Aval, but if they start fasting already on Monday, then yodin she'enu el mipnei atanis. Then they know, it just be that we have fast days going on this week. It's nothing unique to what's going on now.
I imagine this is talking about non-Jewish storekeepers.
So,
Because I would imagine that Jewish storekeepers knew then about Bahab. But it would make sense that the Goyish storekeepers...
So I want to be clear. So we know, I said Bahab as an example at the beginning, but the truth is here we're not talking about the fast days of Bahab. We're talking here about the fast days for rain or a current tragedy going on. So the Jewish store owners might not know. So that's why it's important. Behab is set on the calendar, you're correct. Behab is set, we know about Behab, we know about it months and years in advance. Right? We know after we have Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot. What's Behab? Just to give a quick explanation for those who are not familiar. After Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot, so we have a lot of simcha, we're a mitzvah to be joyous on the Chag. Right? We're supposed to be happy. So what often happens when we're so happy, we're in such a celebratory mood, we go ahead and sometimes we get a little bit too far. Maybe we're drinking a little bit too much, maybe we're doing things we shouldn't be doing. Again, it's understandable because we're supposed to be in a state of simcha, but sometimes we go a little bit too far. So Chazal enacted that after the Chagim, on the next Monday, Thursday, Monday, this discussion about exactly when, but then we have a fast day to, so to speak, get a kapara, as a source of atonement, after these Chagim. So that's the concept in a nutshell. But that's unique to the Chagim. But the concept of the Monday, Thursday, Monday fasts in general is not unique to the Chagim. It's something they would do at other times as well, like the Mishnah here is discussing when there is no rain.
Right. No, it doesn't make a difference if it's a classic Bahab or anything else. What I'm saying is that Jewish storekeepers probably would have known they were part of the community, so they wouldn't think famine's coming. They know exactly what's happening.
So I'll tell you, it could be you're right. I'll also just throw out there that very often today we live in a world where we appreciate this. We have immediate connection to everything. right? You could be here in Israel and you could be seeing what's going on in China. You could be seeing what's going on in America. We have immediate connection right here. So for us, it's very simple. We're interconnected. But for them, right, just think about Rosh Chodesh, for instance. How long did it take to get the message about Rosh Chodesh? A very long time. To the extent that they would take, the Mishnah says, they would go by horseback to try and relate the message. It would take 2 weeks to get the far-flung communities. So not necessarily did everyone know. So I think it could be even in the Jewish community. That's why I mentioned that if it's not something set on the calendar in advance, it could be even the Jewish community would be unaware. Okay, so what do we see from here? Why are we bringing this up? Why are we talking about fast days? What do we see? That there was a precedent that Jews would go shopping for Shabbos when? On Thursday. Sounds good, right? I love this. This rabbi is amazing. He gives me all the heterim. I can do whatever I want. We can start shopping early, good. Or we'll have to see, maybe it's a little more complicated. Maybe it's more okay. Maybe we're jumping to conclusions a little too quickly. Okay, so if you look though in source 16, it sounds actually very much in accordance with what we just saw. Because the Shulchan Aruch in source 16 rules, again, in goes Ritani Tel Tzibur B'Tchila B'Yom Chamishi. You're not supposed to make the first fast on a Thursday. Again, Shlo Afki Yasharim. And he says, V'afiu b'makom she'en lachush takach. Even if you're in a place where you think, come on, today we're so interconnected. Today, we know no one's going to raise the prices. You get the message out. It's not a big deal. He says, even if the concern doesn't apply, we have a low plug, we don't differentiate, we go ahead, and we never declare the first fast on a Thursday. So again, but what do you see from here? The Shulchan Aruch is paskening, he's concerned for this issue, that he's assuming that people will be buying food for Shabbos on Thursday. So we have a precedent from the Shulchan Aruch to buy food earlier. So to say that it's forbidden, I think that we can rule out, right? We have a precedent that this was done. At the very least, we see it at the time of a fast, it was done. And to say it's forbidden, I think, is very hard. But we'll have to discuss, is there a mitzvah to the shop specifically on Erev Shabbat? That we have to discuss. Okay, so if you look at source number 17, we have the Gemara in Baba Kama, Daf Pei Bet Amud Aleph. The Gemara says, Ez Asara Tekanot Tikein Ezra. There are 10 practices that Ezra, we know Ezra Sofer, instituted. 10 things he instituted. Now, we have to remember, Ezra was coming back to Eretz Yisrael. He brought the Jews back, right? They were going to rebuild the Beit Sheni, to rebuild the second temple. And as you can imagine, this was a time of major flux in Jewish history. And a lot of things were changing. A lot of things were moving and shifting. So he said, we have to establish set rules that will help us create an opportunity for people to observe mitzvot properly. And this is what he did. He said, 10 takanot. What were 10 takanot? And as we're reading through them, I want you to think about which of these apply and are relevant for Shabbos. Okay, so let's go through. Number 1, shekorin b'mincha b'Shabbat. Right, the practice of reading Shabbat afternoon from the Torah. Okay, so that's obviously very relevant for Shabbat, right? Reading the Torah on Shabbat in the afternoon. So it used to be they didn't have Torah reading on Shabbat afternoon. It used to be they only had Torah reading when? Shabbat morning. That was it. So he said, no, we have to do also Shabbos afternoon. V'korin b'sheni v'chamishi. We have to also read on Monday and Thursday. So that's not really relevant for Shabbat per se, but it's interesting, Monday and Thursday, again, these were marketplace days. As we mentioned, there's something special about Mondays and Thursdays. So he said, when everyone's around, we have to read from the Torah. Also, another reason, why did we read the Torah specifically on Monday, Thursday? An additional reason. The Gemara actually says a more profound reason. Very good. We're not supposed to go 3 days without Torah. Just as we wouldn't go 3 days without water, a person can't live 3 days without water, the Torah is our spiritual source of nourishment. So we can't go 3 days without it. Yeah?
What's the time though when Torah was only read every once in a year? The whole thing's
Completed once a year.
So that's a discussion. So today, we actually complete the Torah every single year. There are communities, though, where the Torah, again, it's about completion. There are communities, however, where the Torah was actually read, where the Torah was completed. At one point, they were on a triennial cycle. They would read every 3 years in certain communities. Again, it wasn't so standardized like it is today, earlier in history. Today, it's very set. We have the Torah reading, everything's divided, not only into parshiot, but into aliyot. Right? Every chumash has almost the exact same breakup of the aliyot. It's very, very standardized today. It wasn't always like that. So again, Ezra, we already see the beginnings of the set Torah reading that we have was here when Ezra entered Eretz Yisrael. Okay, and as we mentioned, number 3, they would have judgments, right? Days of judgment. So if you had a court case, you would wait until it was marketplace day, and then you would go in front of the court. Number 4, they would do laundry on Thursday. Ooh, okay. Laundry on Thursday. Let's hold on to that. So first of all, I think that definitely, does that relate to Shabbos? Probably. Why are we doing laundry on Thursdays?
How much can you do on Friday?
That's a great question.
Why don't you do it on Tuesday?
Why not do it on Tuesday? Okay, very good. Very good. So you hear here, he tells us explicitly, we're supposed to do laundry on Thursday, not on Friday. He instituted a practice to do it on Thursdays. And on a simple level, why is that? It's very simple, because...
Drying. If you did it on Friday, it would then dry into Shabbos. Then you
Okay,
have the problem.
very good. So one reason is laundry takes a very long time. And if you're going to do your laundry on Friday, even if you do it in the morning, right? If you're actually going down to the river with your basket, right? If you can imagine, right? We're spoiled rotten, right? You're going down to the river with your basket. You're laundering all the clothing one by one, putting it in the river, and then you have to separate the clothing and you have to dry the clothing, and it's a whole long Chad Gadya. So by the time it comes for Shabbos, your clothing's not ready. Or it's your wedding, you go into Shabbos wearing wet clothing. Not so pleasant. Not recommended. And worst of all, right, you won't have time to do your Shabbos preparations. So as I said, we're not doing this. We're not doing this. You do your laundry the day before. You come into Shabbos. Shabbos is for Shabbos. Erev Shabbos is for Erev Shabbos. Thursday can be for laundry. Number 5. But we have to think about, by the way, as we're reading this, why then, if that's the case, so why? What's unique about laundry? Aren't all my preparations the same? Why shouldn't I do everything on Thursday then? Why just my laundry on Thursday? Right? So that's also something we have to think about. Hold on to that. Okay, very good. So I'll have to see, what is considered the fun stuff, right? The fun stuff is left for Friday. What's considered the fun stuff? What are the things we associate with Shabbos? We don't want laundry to be associated with Shabbos. I think this is on the simple level, right? Laundry shouldn't be what we associate with Shabbos. Buying some nice foods for Shabbat, doing fun cooking with your family, getting delicious things, that's Shabbos. That's what we associate with Shabbos. So it could be this is the reason. It could be, again, because laundry takes longer and we don't want your clothes to be dry and ready. It could be. So different reasons given. But again, it's something to think about.
Also ironing. In other words, part of that is also gihuts. And once again, if the laundry is done on Friday, people might do gihuts too late in the day.
Correct. Right. So it's a long, long process and something we have to be mindful of. Think about today. Maybe our laundry doesn't take quite as long today. But think about what processes today take us a long time to do. Think about it. What takes me a long time that maybe I can actually do on Thursday? I think that's really the thing we have to be thinking about. It's not just about laundry. What things can I perhaps do that take me a very long time that aren't necessarily associated with Shabbos, don't give me that nice feeling, that maybe I could do on Thursday? I think that's perhaps the intention of Ezra here. Okay? So we have the first 4. Now it gets a little interesting. Number 5, V'ochlim shum be'erev Shabbat. They had a practice to eat garlic on Erev Shabbos. Okay? For those who know why, wonderful. Okay? If you don't know, you can ask me after the class. I said if you don't know, you can ask me after the class. Okay, number 6. V'tshitehei isha mashkemet be'ofa.
What's the significance of showing on Shabbos?
I'll have to tell you after. I'll have to tell you after. It's a very good question. It's very interesting. Okay, number 6. V'shtehei isha mashkemet be'ofa. A woman should wake up early, right, to start baking. So notice, I bolded this one for you. What do you think? Is this one relevant for Shabbos? What do you think? Is waking up early to bake it just says, so waking up early to bake, is that connected to Shabbos? So most of us, I think, naturally assume that what are you waking up early to do? To bake your challah. So you have challah for Shabbos. I think that's the simple understanding. Rashi actually, on the spot, takes a very different approach. Rashi says, you know why you have to wake up early? He says, it's not so you'll have food for Shabbos. He says, no. He says, it doesn't say the word Shabbat here even. It just says that a woman should wake up early to bake. So Rashi thinks this is a rule every day of the week. Now, so most of us are saying, seriously, really, I'm giving you headaches here. But Rashi assumes Rashi assumes correct that it's so you should have food prepared in case someone is hungry. Maybe someone will come knocking at your door. Maybe there's someone who's poor. Maybe you'll see someone who needs a little extra bite to eat. So he assumes. I mean, Mashiach even, okay. So again, so Rashi assumes it's something we should always have. If you want to be a house of Hachnas and Orchim, you want to be a house that you can always forgive people. You can feed anim who come to your door. You have what to offer them. You should already prepare every morning, he assumes. Every morning, a fresh. Right? We assume this is something we associate with the bakery. He says, no, your own personal house. You should have food, it's good. Number 7, Vishtei Isha Chogeret B'Sinar. Okay. Number 8, Vishtei Isha Chofefet V'Tovelet. Okay, different other practices I want to focus so much on. These things are real relevant to tefillah. When you go to the mikvah, there's a concept of doing chafifa, right? But we do our mikvah preparations. Women who do this know. There's a whole process that we go through, a chafifa. Before they do the tefillah, they have to go ahead and do iyun on their goof. They have to make sure they have no chatzitzas, no interruptions between them, their body, their skin, and the water itself. A very important practice. And not just they should jump in the mikvah, they should be prepared. They should do preparations. And number 9, V'shirochlin machzin bayarot. Okay, and number 10, and he also instituted v'tikein tefillah l'balei keren. The concept, if someone has a seminal emission, that they'd have to go to the mikvah afterwards before they can go ahead and say words of Torah or brachot or Shem Hashem. So those were the practices that Ezra involved. So by show of hands, how many? Let's just count to ourselves. How many of these have to do with Shabbos? So we have, let's go through, reading the Torah, right, on Shabbos afternoon, number 1. We have doing laundry on Thursday. We said it almost for certainly has to do with Shabbos. Eating garlic on Erev Shabbat. And perhaps baking. So 4 out of the 10 have to do with Shabbos. It's very interesting. 4, at least 3, but perhaps 4 out of the 10 have to do with Shabbos. It's very interesting. And again, Shabbos is a huge part of who we are as Jews. Right? Ezra understood this. Shabbos is part of who we are. It's part of a fundamental essence of our being. And he made almost half of the practices here on this list really connected to Shabbos. I think it should really highlight for ourselves what it is, how the important place, the important role that Shabbos plays.
How much of these are affected by modern technology?
That's a great question.
In other words, washing.
Okay, the question is, yeah.
Washing and drying takes an hour.
Correct.
So what does that have to do then with we worry about?
Yeah. So it's a great question. The question is, we have modern day technology today. So today we can do a lot of things much quicker, and we have machines do it for us. So something like laundry, for instance, maybe we could do it earlier. That's the question. And I think, I'll just tell you offhand, we're going to see a little bit later in some of the sources, but I'll just tell you the quick answer. The Shmir Shabbos Kiyilchata writes that you're correct. When it comes to laundry, he thinks they really could do it on Friday. And he thinks today, because we have modern technology like laundry machines and we have dryers, the Shmir Shabbos Kiyilchata holds, not everyone agrees, but the Shmir Shabbos Kiyilchata, which is a very reliable sefer, thinks that yes, you could do laundry no problem on Friday. So again, times have changed a little bit, and we have to be able to think about what that means for us in our own lives. But I think the concepts, things that are not directly relevant to Shabbos, we should try and do earlier, I think is very important. I think that's very important. Okay, I didn't want to go into all the details to overwhelm people, but yeah, so just the translation. So rochlin, like a rochel, is a peddler. So the peddlers should go ahead and they should go out throughout the cities and share their wares. Right, that was part of the institution. He wanted them to go around. So that's number 9. Okay. So yeah, it's something that they would wear. They had like a certain type of belt. Yeah. So I'm not so familiar with the reason behind. I have to look in the Gemara there. I don't remember offhand.
Well,
for that one.
Lou, you actually bring the Rashi says over here, will be shum tzniusa.
Very good. So he says, right. So we know it's for some concept of tznius, that they would have to dress a certain way. They want to be extra careful about tzniut when they're entering Eretz Yisrael. Again, so it's interesting actually. So one of the 10 is about tzniut. So again, you think about what in terms of the percentages, how we evaluate all the different things. So again, tznius is a very important Jewish value. He felt it so important to make a takana for this reason. Let's go ahead to the next paragraph. We have here again, why do we have to do laundry on Thursdays? He says explicitly here, the Gemara, this is the Gemara still, it's not Rashi, it's the Gemara. The Gemara says, what I did is I gave you the Breita at the top, and then I fast forwarded for you, that's the ellipses there, the 3 dots. Right, fast forwarding, I saved you a lot of reading in the Gemara. Okay, quick synopsis. They should do laundry on Thursday out of honoring Shabbat. So again, laundry is very much connected to Shabbos. Why? Not just you shouldn't be busy and bogged down with your laundry, but they should have clean clothes for Shabbos. Sometimes you see people, They have Shabbos clothes and they have weekday clothes. But they say, my Shabbos clothes, they're not that dirty. I compare them to my weekday clothes. My weekday clothes are the ones that are really dirty. So they don't launder the clothes for Shabbos. But actually the most important clothes to launder, even if they're like only a little bit dirty, the most important clothes to laundry are your Shabbos clothes. As difficult as that might be, for people who wear suit jackets or long dresses, they take up a lot of space in the washing machine or the dryer. You can't even sometimes to bring the laundry mat. So it can be a little more of a headache, but that's actually the most important thing to launder. And again, the whole point is that we should have nice clothes for Shabbat.
Excuse me, if you happen to put your clothes in the dryer, you set it before Shabbos, put those through Shabbos, is that okay?
Okay, great question. This is relevant in many, many Jewish homes, right? A very important halachic question. Can you go ahead, it's not directly relevant, but it's an important topic, so I'll just say, okay, can you go ahead and press the start button on your dryer 2 minutes before Shabbos, and it'll be going off on Shabbos, but okay, you finished your laundry, you're not doing anything, the machine's working on its own. Are you allowed to do that? So the halacha is, so a good question. So there's a few issues involved. So number one, if you're going to be taking the clothes out on Shabbat, right? And certainly if your dryer has a light on it, that's for sure not allowed. Okay, that I think people know. But in addition, there are one very important issue we have to think about that's very relevant. The most relevant one, I think, is so there's one issue. Okay, so there's the Maras Ayin we have to discuss. So let's save that for the end. Okay, but in terms of the Ramah writes that you're not supposed to have noisy appliances going off in your home, noisy machinery going off in your home on Shabbat. Why not? So it's connected to this idea of Maras Ayin. Because what happens if I have a loud, noisy thing going on? He talks about an example. He talks about having a grinder, a big grinder going on. So if people can hear the sound from the next room over, people think, what's this guy doing? He's operating his grinder on Shabbos? So for this reason, if the noise is so loud that it can be heard from the next room over, for Ashkenazim, not for Sephardim, for Ashkenazi Jews, okay? I'm Ashkenazi, okay? So for Ashkenazi Jews, you would not be allowed to operate that on Shabbat because, again, it's connected to Maras Ayin. So a similar question this touches on a lot of areas of halacha. People ask about alarm clocks. Can you have an alarm clock go off on Shabbat? So that's also an interesting question. That's a little bit more complicated, a little more nuanced. But again, you have to think about loud appliances. So what loud appliances do I have in my home? Similar question also. My in-laws had something like this, a little different. But people often want to know, can I have my dishwasher be running on Shabbos? Right? So if it's a quiet dishwasher, the answer is yes, you actually can. But if it's loud or if it makes beeping noises, let's say when it finishes the cycle or something like that, then it might be more of an issue, again, for Ashkenazim. So these are things to start thinking about in terms of the appliances that we have and how we have to be concerned. The Pasuk says, people think, oh, what's Maras Ayin? Come on, Maras Ayin. No one's listening, no one's hearing it, what's the big deal? The Gemara says, Maras Ayin is a concern even b'chadri chadarim, even the most private of places where no one else is around. So the Gemara gives us rules, and we have to follow the rules from Maras Ayin. It's actually based on a pasuk, the concept of Maras Ayin, right? We have to be clean in the eyes of Hashem and the eyes of other people around us. So this is very important. We have to take it seriously. We can't just say, roll our eyes, oh, come on, no one's around, it's not a big deal. I think it's something we do have to think about. And in terms of the practical ramifications, sometimes it's a little harder. But again, if you do your laundry on Thursday, it never comes up. Yeah, last question, then we're going to go on.
What about a soldier who comes home right before Shabbat and is going back right after Shabbat?
Yeah. So it's a good question. So again, so in terms of running the washer on Shabbat, right? So I'm going to really focus on the washer. The dryer, I think, is more relevant. So the dryer is this issue of Maras Ayin. So it's rabbinically forbidden because of Maras Ayin here. So again, we're not allowed to violate the Rabbanans though. So the soldier either has to figure out something. If he's Sephardi, he has no problem, right? He can just press the power button, he's good. If he's Ashkenazi, he has to figure something out. You have to think about another plan that you can do to make it a little bit more easy. And sometimes you have to be a little bit innovative sometimes when it comes to these things.
I understand. You mentioned twice if you're Sephardi. How do they think differently from Ashkenazi?
So the Shulchan Aruch doesn't hold from this stringency of the Ramah about the grinder that I mentioned. That's why.
How does that affect the washing machine?
Because any loud appliance, the reason is any loud appliance, according to Shulchan Aruch, is not an issue on Shabbat, assuming you started before Shabbat. He's not concerned about Maras Ayin in this case. The Ramah, however, is concerned. And he makes a blanket rule that for loud appliances in our house, we're not allowed to have them running if they can be heard from the next room over.
Except when the Rabbi lived, what appliances are you talking
The grinder. He was talking about a grinder. I said the word appliance because I'm talking in the modern.
They haven't
No, so they would have it. There's a system. They had like this big. It wasn't like a hand grinder.
Mill.
Like a mill. Correct. He's talking more like a mill. Correct. Okay. So let's wrap up this section here. So again, in source number 17. So we saw so far again some of the reasons. We have the reason for laundry. He tells us here the reason for the garlic. Okay, skipping ahead, and he mentions here at the end that there are 5 things. Right, 5 things. Tanu Rabbanan, right? Second paragraph, third line. Tanu Rabbanan, Taf Reish, Tanu Rabbanan. Chamisha dvarim ne'emru b'shum. Actually, we'll skip this line. I'm sorry. Okay, the last line, just to go to the bold. V'shetehei isha mashkemet ve'ofa. That a woman should go ahead and wake up early to bake. Why? So we saw again, kishdei pat mitzuya la'anim. And there should be bread available to the poor. V'shetehei isha chogeret b'sinar mishum tzniuta. So we mentioned this already. So we have to be thinking about what we're going to do to prepare for Shabbos. Let's move ahead now to source number 18. How does the Shulchan Aruch paskin? So we learned the Gemara. We learned a little bit of we talked about the Rashi. What do we have here in the Shulchan Aruch? How do we rule about this? So it says the Shulchan Aruch, Afiu mi shetzarich la'acherim. Even for a person who needs other people to help him prepare for Shabbos, im yesh lo me'at mishalo, if a person can go ahead and not rely, if a person has a little bit for himself, he should go ahead and focus on what he has. Tzarich v'zarez atzmo lechabed et Shabbat with what he has. He has to work extra hard to be with the materials in front of him. With the basic, if a person's poor, we're talking about here. If a person is poor, he doesn't have assets, he doesn't have what to provide himself for Shabbos. So yes, he rely on other people, but as much as possible, he should do with what's in his ability to prepare properly for Shabbos. And there's a Gemara, he quotes here, V'lo amru, aseh Shabbatcha chol. The Gemara says, you should make your Shabbos like a weekday, v'al titzarich labriot, and do not become dependent on others. Right? Better not to go and ask for tzedakah, better to make your Shabbos more like a weekday than being reliant on tzedakah. But that only applies to someone who is, right, who is in a very dire straits. He says, therefore, don't go all out on the rest of the week. He says you have to be very, very meager during the rest of the week in order to have enough for Shabbos. Better not to rely on people, better to have a more meager lifestyle. This you won't be dependent on others, so this we can afford to have food for Shabbos. Hopefully for no one in the room it's relevant. Hopefully for no one in this room this is relevant. But I think it's something we have to think about. Again, how much we're putting in for Shabbos. Imagine going the whole week and you're eating like scraps of bread and a little bit of milk and a little bit of water, and it's hard. But the Shulchan Aruch says that's what we have to be willing to do to be able to honor Shabbos properly. It's amazing. And he says here, he concludes, Mitakanat Ezra shi mechabsim begadim b'chamish b'Shabbos, as we saw in the Gemara, there's a practice that we have to do laundry on Thursday, mikavod haShabbat. Says the Ramah, Noagin lalush kedei shiur chala babayit. We have a practice to go ahead and knead dough. How much dough should we need? So you have the opportunity to do the shiur of challah. So people were wondering, why do we have to prepare the bread? Why is it the Gemara said, one of the 10 takanot of Ezra was that you have to have bread. You have to wake up early to bake bread. Why? Says the Ramah, I'll tell you why. It's for what everyone else here in the room said. Not what we saw later. It's not because just there'll be food for the poor come into your home. No, it's something unique to Erev Shabbos, says the Ramah. There's something special about making challah on Erev Shabbos. There's some special component to this particular minhag, the particular takana that Ezra made, to have challahs made in your home on Erev Shabbat. So what is that? So the Ramah writes that in order you'll have a shear challah. According to the Ramah, what's the reason? You have the opportunity to do a fresh challah. So which means, it's very interesting, according to the Ramah, what's better? If a person has the opportunity, according to the Ramah, what is better? If a person has the opportunity to make challah, let's say once a month, right? Once a month, and you'll have a huge batch of challah, that this way you can do the mitzvah of a fresh challah, or to do it once a week, but then you'll never get to do a fresh challah. So it seems, from here, we'll have to see in a second, but it seems from this Ramah that the whole reason to do it is you can do the mitzvah of a fresh challah. It's very telling. right? It also seems from here that if you have the choice of going to the bakery, right, buying baked challahs, or doing it yourself, what's the mitzvah according to the Ramah? To do it yourself. So you can have the mitzvah again of Hafrashas challah. But we'll have to see in a second, though, regarding what is the exact nature of the mitzvah, because it's not so clear. This is the opinion of the Ramah, as we mentioned. But we'll see as we go several other explanations, perhaps, of why there's a minhag to bake challahs on Erev Shabbos.
But I don't understand, it's better to not make bracha Rosh Hashanah, but to do it Erev Shabbos, or to do the big batch. I mean, what's
Yeah, so I'm right now I'm making it more black and white. It's not as much gray right now. You're focusing on the gray, I think. Right? The question is, what about without the bracha? If you do hafrashas challah without the bracha, we know that there's a certain amount of flour that you have to use in order to do hafrashas challah with the bracha, and a little bit less if you're doing hafrashas challah without a bracha. So again, I think I'm making it more black and white. I'm not so much going into the gray area. Hafrashas challah without a bracha might be a mitzvah. So that's why I didn't discuss that. That's not what the Ramah is addressing. But I think again, there's at least a side to say, there's at least a good reason to assume that if you do a Hafrashas challah without a bracha, there's at least a chance that you're performing the mitzvah, assuming you have at least the minimum shir. Yeah. So that's a more nuanced question. I don't know the answer to that. If you have the chance to do it with a bracha or once a month or without a bracha every week, that's a good question. I'm not sure. Okay. And he concludes here, why should you do this? So you have challahs, you can go ahead and make a motzi over on Shabbos and Yom Tov. Now, if you look at the Mishnah Berurah there on the spot, I didn't put it on the source sheet because I didn't want to overwhelm everyone with too many sources, but there are Mishnah Berurah writes that one of the goals of making the challah, he says obviously, he says two reasons. Obviously, so we have food for Shabbos, and obviously, as the Ramah mentioned also, we can go ahead and perform the mitzvah of Hafrashas challah. And he says, but why specifically do we want you to do a mitzvah of Hafrashas challah on Friday? What's the connection between Hafrashas challah on Friday and the mitzvah of Hafrashas challah and Friday? And it's very interesting because he quotes here, he says as follows, he says, Ibda chalato shel olam. He says, what happened on Friday? There's another thing that happened on Friday, which is, we know the very first sin, right, the very first chet ever performed in mankind, right, when Chava went ahead and she ate from the Eitz Hadat. Now, what in the world does that have anything to do with Shabbos? So he says that chalato shel olam, the challah of the world was destroyed. What's the challah of the world? Who's that a reference to? Adam. Adam, the first man, was destroyed a little bit on that Friday. Because as soon as Chava ate from that Eitz Hadat, now the concept of death was introduced into the world. So who was responsible for that? The first person to sin really was, in this instance, was Chava. And therefore, that's why the takana was that an Isha, a woman, should go ahead and be metakin that chet. She introduced the concept of death into the world by eating from the Eitz Hadat and convincing Adam to join her. And therefore, she should be the one who is metakin this chet by taking, now it's amazing, right? You'll be metakin by taking the challah. You're taking away the challah of the world, which is Adam. Why is he called a challah, by the way? Well, calling a person a challah, it sounds like it's not nice. Why is Adam called a challah here? So challah, right, is primarily composed, right? You have the dough and you have the water, right? So too, Adam's composition was made in the same way. You have the earth and you have the water. And what is Adam? Adam is the portion which is taken. He's the challah, we call challah the whole thing, right? Colloquially, that's what we call the term. But challah is actually the portion given to the kohanim. That's the challah. Challah, that's what we're supposed to do with the challah. Today we don't do that. Today we take off a portion and we burn it. But really it's supposed to go to the kohanim. The challah, we call the term challah, we call the whole loaf of challah. You know how that came about? You know the history behind this? Challah, the reason we call it challah, the whole loaf of challah, is because it used to be, people would say, this piece of dough had challah taken from it. And eventually that became shortened to, this is challah. So very quickly it evolves this confusing language, but actually the challah is what you're not eating. You're eating the portion that's not challah, that has challah taken from it. So challah is the most choicest of the piece of dough that you have in front of you. That's what challah is. Challah is the portion you're taking off, that it's supposed to be given to the kohanim. So who is Adam? He's chalatos olam. He was the challah of the world. He was taking the choicest portion of an entire adamah. Adam means from the word adamah. Right? He was made from the ground. Right? It's a combination of soul and body. right? That's who we are. That's what Adam is. He was made from the ground, and he had a godly neshama inside of him. So they took that Adamah, they took the choicest portion from the Adamah. Where was the choicest portion of the Adamah? Where was Adam created from? Where did Hashem take that earth from? Very good. The dust of the Kodesh HaKodashim. The Holy of Holies. That spot where the Kodesh HaKodashim lies was the spot that he took that dirt to use to create Adam Arishon. So the choicest portion is what we give to the Kohanim. So Adam Arishon, Ibda Chalato Shalom, he was destroyed a little bit as the concept of death was introduced into the world. So we were mitaking that with the taking of challah that we do on Shabbos, where we do our own challah. We fix the problem. Okay, let's turn over. Okay, we're going to go to page 6 now. Okay. So we have here a very interesting practice, and this is again the Ramah writing. I don't think anyone does it. I've never seen this. But he says, there's those who write that in some places, there's some places that have the practice that they eat this thing called pastida. What in the world is pastida?
No, but it sounds good.
Sounds good.
Okay.
So people say, okay. So pastida, he says, Zeicher, there's a little bit of a hint here, if you don't know. He says, Zeicher laman, because it's a hint for the man, shaya mechuser lamala u'amatza. It was covered on top and on bottom. But I don't see people doing this. I don't see anyone who's careful about this. I don't see anyone who does this. But he says, I heard about in some places, they eat this pastida on Friday night. So, first of all, what in the world is the connection between the pastida and the man? So the man, we have to remember, the man was covered, the Torah itself tells us, it was covered on top and on bottom with dew, towel. It's almost like amazing, right? You go to the store, right? You have the little achmaniyot. What do? If they really want to package them properly, they wrap them in saran wrap, right? So here's the first saran wrap ever, right? The little packaging of dew you had. Hashem Kadosh Baruch Hu, amazing. He's wrapping the achmaniyot. He's wrapping our man that we got every single morning. And correspondingly, we eat this pastida. Pastida, what's the pastida? It was almost like a meat or cheese pie. That's what pastida is. What's a pie? A pie, you have a filling, and then you have a top layer and a bottom. So corresponding to the man. So we don't do this today. But what do we do as we're trying to remember the man? What do we do? We have two challahs to remember the man, that's for sure, right? That's what else?
Tablecloth on the bottom.
Very good. We cover the challahs on top, the challah cover, and also on bottom, the table cover, or plates, whatever is on bottom. Okay, we cover the challahs to remember the man. I once years ago, when I was 18 years old, I was in Yeshivat Shalavim, and I went to one of my Rebbeim's house for Shabbos, and I saw that not only did he cover his challahs, but he actually, as he made hamotzi, he continued to keep the challahs covered. And I learned now later that many people do this. It's actually much more common than I thought. There's a strong makor for this. Many people have this practice. They'll keep the challahs covered even when they make hamotzi. And I can't tell you, I used to not do this. I didn't grow up doing this. But then I actually decided for myself I would do it. Why did I decide to do it? Because I remember it very distinctly. I asked my Rabbi at that time, why are you doing it? And he explained to me, it's to remember the man. Now the truth is, we always cover the challahs to remember the man. But because when he said the bracha, he had them covered, it made more of an impact on me. And I started to ask, why are you doing it? So my Shabbos table now, since I started doing this, I can't tell you how many people ask me, why are you doing that? And it just gets this great conversation going. And it's very important, I think, to have an awareness of what we do. What are we doing? Yeah. Very good. So if you look at source number 19, so I think this one should be obvious, hopefully, but the Magen Avraham tells us, for the laundry, he says, Kavod Shabbos. What's the Kavod Shabbos? Kolomar, it's not just that you should have nice clothes for Shabbos. He says an additional reason. Shelo yichabsu b'erev Shabbos, shiyu pnuim lekavod Shabbos. We need to be available on Fridays. We cannot be bogged down with laundry. Do that in advance. We need to be available. So I think it should be obvious, but again, according to the Magen Avraham, we have to understand, is Thursday the only day they could do laundry? So he says no. He says according to the Magen Avraham, it's not just Thursday, right? Someone in the front here said, Why not do it on Wednesday? Why not do it on a Tuesday? So according to Magen Avraham, yeah, that's 100% correct. The reason is you should be available. So if you can do your laundry earlier in the week, perfect. It's not unique to Thursday. The main thing is not to be doing it on Friday. That's what he assumed. Okay, if you look a little bit later, this is Siman Reish Nun. The Magen Avraham has another comment where he talks about the mitzvah of Chala. He says, why is this that we go ahead and we can wake up early in the morning to do our Shabbat preparations? He says, Yashkim Boker. So we would have thought, most of us would think, so when is the ideal time to go shop? Right? So this is what we started with, and I think this is the most important question of the day. When is the ideal time to go shopping for Shabbos? I don't know about you, but we do a big Osher Adron. We go to the store and we fill up the whole car, and you're just finding parking there. So it's a whole mess. So when you're trying to go to the store on Erev Shabbos, it's not easy. So it does take several hours sometimes. So when do you do that big shopping round? That's the big question of the day. So what's the Magen Avraham tells us? He says nope. He says V'yoter tov. He believes the best time, believe it or not, Viknot b'yom shishi. Why? Why does he say to do it on Friday? Why not do it on Thursday? I would do it earlier. Well, shouldn't we just said? We just finished saying the Magen Avraham taught us that you should be doing your laundry on Thursday. You have to be available. And now the Magen Avraham is in the same breath. It's the same person. The same exact guy is telling me you have to be available on Fridays. And here he's telling me that I have to do my shopping on Friday. So he says, "Vayomer al kol davar shekoneh zeu kavod Shabbos." And when you do this, you should say, "This is the kavod Shabbos." Verbalize it. I'm buying this the kavod Shabbos. And he says, and you should know that even though, as we saw earlier, he quotes here the Shulchan Aruch. Okay, he says, "Siman Tov Kuf Ayin Bet is the Shulchan Aruch." It sounds like from the Shulchan Aruch that you could do it on Thursday, as we saw by the fast days. He quotes this, right, by the fast days, that they would buy food on Thursday. He says, "Va'afal pi sheichin bashkama mitzvah hi sheosif gam bein hashmashot." And he concludes, he says, even though you woke up early Friday morning and you did some preparations, you should continue to prepare throughout Friday. Prepare a little bit more on Friday afternoon. Why? What's the allusion to this? They prepare both in the evening and in the morning and also close to Shabbos. Vaya Mishneh. There's an allusion to this because we got a double portion of man, and therefore we do double preparations. Again, is those who were there yesterday know there's a connection between the man that we got and the preparations we do for Shabbos. And he says, just as we got a double portion on Shabbat, we also have to do double preparations. So you prepare in the morning, you prepare close to the Shabbos. Okay. Now, is that the only opinion? Come on.
Excuse me, can you wait till I'm done to work, please? Because I was never finished.
Okay, so we'll wrap up and we'll save the questions then. We're almost done with this piece. Okay, he quotes here from the Or Zarua. The Bar Terkei Moshe quotes, "Katav Or Zarua, mitzvah le'achin michad b'Shabbat v'Shabbat kishamai." I think this resonates more with us, right? Shammai. What would Shammai do? He says, "V'afal pi shamru hillel mida acheret haitzab." So okay, he doesn't quote it here, so I'll just tell you. Shammai was known for shopping every day for Shabbos. So no one said that answer, right? People say you go on Thursday, go on Monday. He would shop every day for Shabbos. What in the world is going on with Shammai? The answer is, Shammai, his mind was always on Shabbos. And each day he'd go to the store on Sunday, he'd say, wow, this is amazing, I want to buy this. He'd buy this for Shabbos. He walks in the store on Monday, he says, whoa, this is even better. This one will be for Shabbos. And then he would go ahead and eat the one from Sunday on Monday. And then you go to the store on Tuesday, find even a better one. And then he'd eat a nice food from Monday on Tuesday, and he'd save the nice one for the best one from Tuesday for Shabbos, etc., etc. So Shammai ate well the whole week. Right? But more importantly, what you see from that is how much he honored Shabbos, how much he cared about Shabbos, how much was such an important value of his. And I think that's really the goal here. So he quotes here that the Or Zarua says we should do like Shammai. And he says, even though Hillel usually follow Hillel, it's true, usually follow Hillel. So the Gemara there tells us that Hillel had tremendous bitachon in Hashem. Hillel believed in Hashem. Hillel trusted in Hashem. And he would just wait until Friday to do his shopping. That's what he would do. He said, there'll be good things in the store on Friday, I'm not worried. He would trust in Hashem, that he would find something good for Shabbos. He says, so maybe you would say we should do like Hillel. Says the Or Zarua, no. He says, why? He says, right? Even though everything he did was for the sake of heaven, he had this particular character trait, aval gam hillel modeh, shemidat beit Shammai adif itfeh. that even Beit Hillel agrees that the practice of Beit Shammai is better. So then why did Hillel do like this? So if you're on the level of Hillel and you have tremendous bitachon in Hashem, you can assume that you're going to get the best thing on Friday. But he assumes that even Hillel agrees that for most people who are not on that level, most people who don't have such bitachon in Hashem, they're not such a strong faith that they're going to find the perfect thing in the store on Friday at the last minute, right before Shabbos. He says, for even Beit Hillel would agree that Beit Shammai is the best practice. And therefore he concludes here, the Magen Avraham writes, that according to the OUisrael, the best thing is to always be thinking about Shabbat whenever you have an opportunity. And he concludes here that even though the Ramban, in the bold section, Ramban katav v'peresh achumash tavedi yochatak kashamai, even though the Ramban says that the halacha does not follow Shammai, and v'siman reish mem bet mashma or zarua, he says nonetheless the Shulchan Aruch, as we saw, who says you could do your shopping on Thursday, sounds like the or zarua, and therefore he says despite what the Ramban said, he thinks that there's a great mitzvah to go ahead and do our shopping earlier or anytime we have the opportunity, and to always be thinking about Shabbat. And he concludes, he says, so with the Bach who backs this up, and he quotes from Rashi on the word of Zachor. Where does Rashi say on the word of Zachor? Rashi says, Zachor et Yom HaShabbat lekadosho. We have to remember Shabbos to sanctify it. What does Rashi say on the word of Zachor? So most people skip over these Rashis because it's a grammar Rashi.
Just this morning, I'm sorry. Go
on. Very good. So Parsha Yitro, that's what we're doing today, right? Rashi says, Zachor Yom HaShabbos means constantly. Every single day. Every single day. Shabbos is not something we do once a week. Shabbos is a daily activity. Daily activity. Does that mean we observe Shabbos every day? No. But it means we have to be thinking about Shabbos. What am I doing today to prepare for Shabbos? And in fact, the Ramban actually writes, similarly, right? The Ramban who said we don't paskin like Beit Shammai, but even the Ramban held we do a mitzvah d'oraita when we mention Shabbos every day. When do we do that in the davening, by the way? At the end of davening, we say the Shir Shal Yom, right? We make mention that you're doing. People come here to the Rabbi Adler's class know about the Shir Melovim, right? But right, the truth is, it's something we do every single day. It's something we do every single day, and the Ramban agrees to this. And in Eretz Yisrael, of course, we're thinking about Shabbos all the time. Shabbos is always on our minds. And so let's conclude here because I know we have about 3 minutes left. Let's wrap up. So the final few sources, we have here the Torah Tamima. Okay, the Torah Tamima tells us that the Katav B'Siman Reishei Zayin, the Pashut the Takanat Ezra, Shtei Isha Mashkemet Ve'ofa, Ahachi Kar the Drasha Zu Samich. So he says that he's relying on this. V'dati ein kol shaychut b'takana zu lakan. De'atakana aita lo rak al erev Shabbat, ki im al kol yemei Shavua. He says exactly what we just mentioned. He says that, come on, you really think that Ezra here is talking just about Friday? You think he's talking about just about making challah on Friday? He says no. He says it applies every day of the week. And certainly according to Rashi, you should have bread ready at all times for the poor who walk into your home. So again, we have Rashi, we have the Rambam, we have the Torah Tamima, all assuming that there's a mitzvah to make challah which is not unique to Erev Shabbat. But again, we saw earlier that according to the Ramah and the Mishnah Berurah, there is a unique mitzvah to make challah on Shabbat. Why again? So we have the mitzvah of Hafrashas challah, which we want to connect to Shabbos, and also so we have bread unique for Shabbat. So again, we have two opinions about when there's a mitzvah to make challah. We have many of the Rishonim saying there's a mitzvah to do it all week long. But again, the Mishnah Berurah and Ramah saying there's a unique mitzvah on Friday, Erev Shabbos. And so let's conclude with the Mishnah Berurah. He says in source 22, why do we have this special mitzvah? Hu mimka yoter. He says, why should you go ahead and do your purchases? He's talking about purchasing food. Why should you go ahead and do your purchases on Friday rather than Thursday? He says, not just so because you want to associate with Shabbos. He says, because it'll be mimkar yoter, it'll be recognizable to others. People see, why are you shopping today? Everyone knows I'm shopping for Shabbos. It's Friday. My very action itself demonstrates what I'm trying to accomplish. If you shop on Friday, yes, it's harder. Yes, there's more going on. But there's also an added benefit. The added benefit is my action itself is demonstrating to me what my goal is here. What am I trying to accomplish? And let's jump ahead. He says, he quotes what we mentioned before, that we should do like Beit Shammai. He says most people don't have such great faith. He says we should do like Beit Shammai. And And let's go to the last source here, the last section, the Pini Halacha. He says the Ikar Hachana has to be this Halacha L'maisa. He says the primary preparations that we do have to be on Friday. And he quotes the pasuk that we just saw. It's based on the pasuk that the primary preparations have to be on Friday. The Jewish people went out on Friday to get the double portion of man. And he says for this reason, Yoter Tov biyom shishi me'asher biyom chamishi shenika yoter. And he concludes by saying, I think a very practical reason, that what ends up happening is we're very tired. He says, come on, if you're going to wait until it's Friday to do absolutely everything, you have to be practical also. If you know you're going to be tired, he concludes it's better to do it on Thursday. Okay, so I think that's relevant for most of us. And if B'ezras Hashem, we should be successful in all of our Shabbos preparations, and Hashem should give us bracha, we should have shalom bayis.